Well, welcome back, folks. Today's video is going to be a walkabout of the current condition or state of the reassembly of the Suzuki TS50 project, which obviously you can see. Some of what I'm going to cover today might be a little redundant, might overlap with some previous material, and some of these pieces that we're going to briefly touch on you've seen before as I've done work on them. This project, I've taken a little bit different approach. I'm not showing all the reassembly of everything back on the bike like I've done on some of my other projects. Frankly, I view that as a little redundant. You can see me reassemble other projects, and I know some people like that kind of thing, but to make it a little easier for me moving forward on this project, I'm showing more of the work done on individual components, and the reassembly on the bike itself, I'm not necessarily showing every step like I've done in the past. So again, you might have seen some of these things before, so just bear with me. We're progressing nicely. As you can see, we talked about the cylinder in the top end, cylinder head, etc. That's all done. The electrical system, the loom and wiring is back in relative position. You might notice that the clamps, I've got a clamp here, there's one over there, they're not completely tightened down yet or bent over to complete the tightening of the clamp. I will do that later on. They are in, the clamps and the wiring itself is in relative position of where I think it's going to end up. The coil and ignition system, you can see the cable right here, the high tension lead. That is a new cap, by the way. That is a NOS cap from Suzuki. It had never been used before. That is identical to the original. It does not have Suzuki on it, but it is labeled Made in Japan, and again, that does match the original. The coil, of course, is installed over here. Again, we went through that in some detail along with the splice unit that tied this new high-tension lead into the original coil. I have tested the ignition system for spark, and I do have spark. And I also, I think, talked previously about timing. So the engine is timed, and I do have spark, so we're in good shape there. This left engine cover has obviously been installed. You saw me install the clutch mechanism right here earlier in the video. Got everything back in place, all new screws, JIS appropriate screws in length. Those are new parts from Suzuki. This does have a gasket behind it, by the way, this cover. The covers that cover this part of the flywheel and then the oil pump down there obviously are off. And the reason I leave those off is I'm not done assembling. I have to put the cable in here for the clutch. And of course for the oil pump, once I put oil in it and get the bike running, I will want to check for leaks. And it's very common. In fact, it's almost, at least in my experience, almost expected I might have a little leaking down in here. I have to tighten up some of the fittings, etc. That's why the cover for the oil pump has been left off. You will notice this oil feed line right here I'm pointing to. That is new. That comes up to the oil tank on the opposite side. When we swing around that side of the bike, you'll see that. That is the oil tank, but this is a new line. This clamp at the bottom is new from Suzuki. The top clamp I reused. That was in good condition. That came with the oil tank. But that's really all back in position with an appropriately matching oil feed line, that black vinyl or rubber. Excuse me. A lot of people replace these over time with clear PVC or vinyl tubing. That was not original nor appropriate for these bikes. They had typically a black line, and you can buy these still from Suzuki. A little pricey, but you can get them. That's an aftermarket fuel line. That is again the appropriate diameter inside and outside for that arrangement. Air filter, I haven't really done anything different with that yet. Outside of, I've installed it earlier, of course. This is the air filter canister. The air filter itself, I still have to fabricate the foam. I think I touched on that once before. Everything up in this area right here, the electrical, again, talked about the coil, the rectifier, the regulator, voltage regulator, and everything has been installed. This little bracket right here is for the toolkit. I do not yet have a toolkit put together for this project, though typically I would do that. That'll come much later on. But this is all pretty much done, and is back as best I can determine in position as the factory would have originally done it. I've also added here the chain guard which I had powder coated probably 2 weeks or so ago. This chain guard is not in pristine condition. You can probably see a little pitting right here from the original rust. I decided to go ahead and use it anyway rather than source a different one. Could that pitting be repaired? Well, probably. Again, the issue is powder coating. Since I use heat in the powder coating process, in order to fill those pits, there's a little bit of a specialized technique you have to use to fill those pits before you powder coat it, so that the high heat for around 400 degrees Fahrenheit doesn't affect what you fill it with. Standard polyester body filler would not be appropriate given the high heat that this part is exposed to. So I just went ahead and cleaned it up, removed the rust, powder coated it, and installed it with all new hardware like you can see here. And I think there's one or two other fasteners up underneath that you can't see, but those bolts are new. Let's see, on this side, the side stand right here, reinstalled with all new hardware. That is bolts, spring. It does work, of course, as you can see there. Of course, that was powder coated as well some time ago. On this side of the bike, I think that's about the only new items that we need to review. I think what I'll do is move in a little closer and give you a little better shot, or an up-close view of what's going up in here, because this is kind of busy. So let me reposition the camera. We'll be right back. Battery box. Obviously, there's no battery in it right now. That's a 6-volt battery. This is a 6-volt system. This red lead right here in my hand connects to the positive of the battery. This lead right here with the black and white stripe goes to the negative of the battery. The battery has the connectors, the appropriate matching connectors for these ends already formed and molded into the battery case. All new hardware, as you can see here, and pretty much everywhere else. Again, new clamp over here, which is not tight. New cap on the oil tank. That's still available from Suzuki, so that's brand new. And this is a ground coming up out of, or from rather, the coil, which is down in here. You can't see it in this shot. That's what this is. Excuse me. This fuse connector right here, you can see this is a fuse connection with a spare fuse. That is new from Suzuki. Those are still available, and that does match actually the original to a T. So even though that's new, that is still available and matches the original. Tried to route the wiring as best I could to match what I think was original, looking at photos of other bikes. Most of the wiring in this bike, even though it was relatively intact, was not routed correctly. Someone had been in here over the years, of course, very common, and they'd fished the wires through some spots that they weren't supposed to, and that kind of thing. So when I put it back together, I took care to try to get the wiring as best I could to match what I believe is very close, if not spot on, to the original wiring, including how this is routed underneath the frame right here, protected from the seat, and comes up over here and then goes back around to tie into the tail light when I get around to mounting that. I think that's pretty much it for this little section. Let's move around to the opposite side of the bike and we'll look at the right side and talk about what's going on. Flip this little clip in the middle here. I realized after I shot the previous video segments that I had failed to include the shift lever, which actually has been done for some time. This is not the original lever that came on the bike. This is, see the difference right there. This one I had re-chromed, but unfortunately it's not period correct. A sharp-eyed viewer had pointed out to me some time ago, and I think when I did the chrome review many months back, that this was not the correct shift lever for this bike. This is. So I got this on eBay. He actually gave me a link or two at the time. I picked this up at eBay, and it was in very good condition, little scuffs and minor scratches, so I stripped, again, the zinc, replated it, new rubber, new bolt, and lock washer underneath here. This is not installed yet, I just haven't got around to it, but I just put it in relative position so you can see what it'll look like. So I believe this is the correct shift lever for this model. I don't know what this is off of. I'm guessing it is off a Suzuki model, only because the previous owner of this bike, that's all he had was Suzuki's. And so I'm speculating, I guess, that this came off a different Suzuki model. I don't know which one. I can't match it up. I've looked at other Suzuki photos online, and I have not seen a Suzuki model that this seems to match up to. So it's possible, I suppose, it's from one of the other major Japanese companies. I don't know. If anybody's looking for a good re-chromed shift lever that might work on your bike, contact me, drop me a note. We might be able to make a deal. I just want to move this on because it's of no use to me any further, since I've replaced it with a period correct piece, as you can see. On the right side of the bike, you can see I've added the kickstart lever here. This most of this is all original, with the exception of the rubber itself right here, and then the bolt. That bolt's got that stylized Suzuki S on it, and I wanted to preserve that. But the lock washer underneath it, I think, is new. Other than that, I just stripped all the zinc off and replated all of this, and try to preserve what I could. And it came out pretty good, I think. I took some pains to mount this kickstart lever arm at the right angle. That is, this angle like this. I looked at a number of period advertising for this bike back from 1973 to try to get a sense of how the factory originally installed this lever or this arm, and this seems to be about as close as I can get it looking at the brochures. Very common to see this mounted at all different angles, as people over the years have taken this on and off to get at this cover. So you can pull this cover off. You'll see them up here, you'll see them down here, but this seems to be as close as I could duplicate from the factory advertising. This cap right here, this oil cap, I do have a NOS one, I think, here somewhere. I just haven't put it in yet. This does not have a dipstick. Consequently, I don't know if you can see it in the shop, there's a hole right here, threaded hole, that a bolt threads into. It has a fiber washer underneath. That's intended to allow you to check the oil level. So you loosen the bolt, and if oil starts to weep out, you know your oil's up to that level, you put the bolt, or snug the bolt back up. That's how you determine if you got your oil at the right level, since there's no dipstick. Oil tank, we talked about that a bit on the other side. New oil sight glass right here with gasket that came new from Suzuki, still available. The hold down strap right here is new from Suzuki, still available. Here's that oil feed line we talked about a bit on the other side. Again, what's a little bit unique about that line is it's a, I believe, 6 millimeter, approximately 6 millimeter internal or ID, inside diameter, about an 8 millimeter OD or outside diameter. Usually if you get a 6 millimeter fuel line or oil line, it'll have a larger outside diameter than 8 millimeter. The reason I had to have an 8 millimeter outside diameter fuel line or line is to go through the grommet on the other side of the engine case. So it's a relatively small outside diameter in comparison to the ID. And you can get that from Suzuki, as I mentioned earlier. They're quite pricey. They still offer this, or at least they're still listed as available. I just looked around until I found the appropriate aftermarket fuel line that was black in color. Very common to see these lines replaced with clear vinyl or PVC tubing, or a polyethylene tubing or something along those lines, polypropylene. And there's two reasons I think why people do that. One is it's readily available, inexpensive. Go to the hardware store, get a 18-inch or 24-inch long piece of vinyl, cut it to length. And number two, some people like to see the oil running through the line, like to see the flow. Suzuki did not use clear fuel line or oil feed line on this particular model, or most of their models to my knowledge. They always used a black tubing, as did most of the others. In fact, I know Kawasaki used black also. I couldn't swear to it on Yamaha, but I think Yamaha used black also. So this is period correct looking, and it is the right size. Let's see, what else have we done on this side of the engine. The carburetor, of course, is not attached yet. I have a lot of work to do in here. I do have a new boot that goes from the canister, the oil filter canister, the engine case. That's just sitting on the shelf. There's the boot that goes over here. The cables pass through to activate the carburetor, and the fuel enrichener, or some people call it a choke. I'll have to get to that a little bit later. Over here in the upper left, you can see the seat clamp. This is the hold down clamp. This is all original, just been replated or powder coated. The bolt, the nut, the washer, the spring are all original. I just stripped them and replated them, zinc plated them. The clamp itself, the black clamp, the steel clamp, was stripped and repowder coated to match the rest of the frame. Again, take note that the clamps up here, the wire loom clamps here, and actually there's one over here that you can't see. I have a relative position of where I think they're going to end up, but I have not tightened them yet in case I have to finesse the wiring of the loom a little bit around as I continue on with the final assembly. I think that's about it for this side of the bike, folks, so we'll bring this video to a close. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.